More than 1,500 ghost towns sit officially documented across just 2 Canadian provinces. Not scattered ruins, entire communities with schools, churches, and hospitals, once home to thousands of people. Some you can still walk through today. One was sealed shut in 1982, with its apartments fully furnished and a cinema frozen in time. Another lies 30 meters beneath a lake, where divers still find cookware resting on the bottom. 13 of the strangest are still out there waiting, and what killed each one reveals something deeply unsettling about how this country was built. Bankhead began as a promise of endless energy in the shadow of the Rockies. In 1903, the Canadian Pacific Railway carved out a new town site within Banff National Park, not for tourists, but for coal. The CPR needed a steady supply to power its locomotives and chose this spot for its rich seams and strategic location. The Bankhead Coal Company quickly built a grid of homes, a school, a hospital, and a company canteen, enough to support about 500 residents at its peak. Coke ovens lined the hillside, transforming raw coal into the high-carbon fuel demanded by the railway and industry. For nearly 2 decades, trains rolled in and out, loaded with black rock destined for distant cities. The town pulsed with life, shift whistles, children's voices, the constant haze of smoke. But beneath the surface, the coal was laced with sulfur. Extraction costs climbed, and the quality of the product fell behind what the market wanted. By 1922, the CPR decided to shut down the mine and pull up the spur line. 2 years later, Bankhead was officially abandoned. Nature moved in fast. Today, brick coke ovens stand in quiet rows, their arches slowly crumbling. Concrete foundations and weathered stairways lead nowhere, half swallowed by forest. The railway bed is still visible, a faint scar through the trees. Bankhead's story is written in these remains, a place built by corporate ambition, emptied by the cold logic of resource exhaustion, and left as a silent relic of Canada's boom and bust frontier. The ruins don't just suggest what was lost. They show how quickly prosperity can turn to emptiness when the ground beneath a town gives out. Barkerville began with a stroke of luck and a glint of gold in the Caribou Mountains. In 1862, prospector Billy Barker sank his claim beside Williams Creek, pulling up enough gold to ignite a frenzy that would transform the wilderness overnight. Word spread fast. Within 6 years, Barkerville swelled to nearly 5,000 people, miners, merchants, gamblers, and families chasing the promise of sudden fortune. Wooden storefronts, hotels, and saloons lined muddy streets. The clang of blacksmiths and the chatter of traders filled the air. At its height, Barkerville rivaled any city west of Winnipeg for wealth and excitement. The town boasted a Chinese district, a theater, and even a newspaper, all fueled by the relentless hunt for gold dust and nuggets. But as quickly as the rush began, the veins thinned. By the turn of the century, easy pickings vanished, and the population drained away. The final blow came in 1924, when the last mine closed its doors for good. Barkerville's boom faded to silence, its storefronts and boardwalks left to the elements. Yet unlike most gold towns, Barkerville refused to vanish completely. Today, 125 original buildings stand preserved, their wooden facades and interiors restored by the Barkerville Historic Town and Park Society. Walking the old main street, visitors can step into the bank, the schoolhouse, or the brewery, each one echoing with the ambitions and disappointments of those who came before. Barkerville's story is a testament to the feverish hope that built Canada's western frontier, and to the emptiness that follows when the gold runs out. In the wild upper reaches of the Yukon, the first real town rose on the banks of the 40-mile river. Surveyors mapped the grid in May 1986, carving out 24 lots from the spruce and permafrost. Word of gold in the river gravels traveled fast, and by the early 1990s, nearly 1,000 people had staked their hopes here. Log cabins and rough-hewn stores crowded the muddy main street. The blacksmith's hammer rang out beside the trading post, and 10 saloons did steady business through the endless summer daylight and the long, dark winters. Life in 40 Mile was never easy. Winter temperatures plunged below -40. Supplies arrived by river and often ran low before the ice broke. But the promise of placer gold, the kind you could scoop from the riverbed with a pan, kept men digging, sifting, and dreaming. For a few short years, 40 Mile was the heartbeat of the northern goldfields, drawing not just miners but traders, gamblers, and a few families hoping for a future at the edge of the known world. Then, in 1896, a new strike at Bonanza Creek sparked the Klondike Rush. The exodus was swift. By June 1901, the last major claims were abandoned, and the population collapsed almost overnight. A government dispatch from that summer noted the town was virtually emptied. Only a caretaker and a few winter-bound families remain. By winter, only the cemetery caretaker was left to watch over the graves. Today, 40 Mile stands as a fragment of its former self. One cedar log cabin still clings to its lot, its roof caved in but walls upright. The old schoolhouse, with its restored roof and peeling paint, is kept open by the Yukon Territorial Museum. The cemetery, with its weathered stones and simple fence, endures as a record of those who never left. Archaeological surveys map the faint depressions of vanished homes and the slag heaps from a long, cold forge. In the silence, the story of 40 Mile lingers, a boomtown born of gold fever, emptied by the next big discovery, and left to the wind and the river's slow work. Val-Jalbert began with the thunder of Ouiachuan Falls and the ambitions of Damas Jalbert, who secured a charter for the Ouiachuan Pulp Company in 1901. The planners carved a neat grid of streets into the forest, building a stone mill that towered beside the river. By 1911, the village had grown to about 550 residents, mill hands, their families, and the teachers and priests who staffed the school and the church. Life here revolved entirely around the pulp mill. Each dawn, the whistle echoed off the cliffs, calling men to the machinery that turned local spruce into paper, destined for Montreal and beyond. The town's fortunes rose and fell with the mill's turbines. Company housing lined the hillside. A convent school and a general store anchored daily life. The church bells rang over a place that, for a brief span, seemed permanent. But the entire community depended on a single factory and the flow of water over the falls. In 1927, a provincial order forced the closure of the mill, halting private hydroelectric use on the river. The machinery fell silent. Within months, families packed up and left. By 1930, Val-Jalbert was nearly empty. Its stone mill and wooden homes surrendered to weather and time. Today, the ruins feel suspended between eras. The mill's shell stands watch over the river. The school and church remain, their walls marked by decades of wind and rain. More than 30 workers' houses still dot the hillside, their porches sagging but upright. Unlike the mining towns of the West, Val-Jalbert's story is one of industrial hope in the East. a whole community built on the promise of the pulp trade and lost when that promise dried up. The remains are not just relics. They are the bones of a town that lived and died in the shadow of a single roaring waterfall. Antioch was never meant for the faint-hearted. In 1910, Granby Consolidated Mining carved a copper empire out of the tangled rainforest on British Columbia's north coast, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest city. The company built everything from scratch: smelter, power plant, homes, even a golf course, drawing in 1,500 workers and their families. Ore trains ran day and night, and the smelter's smokestack towered above the tree line, belching a constant plume. But the isolation cut both ways. When copper prices crashed after World War I and the main ore body played out, Granby shut down operations in 1921. The town emptied almost overnight. Today, only the cracked concrete of the smelter and the ghostly outlines of workers' cabins remain, half swallowed by moss and alder. The rail spur stops in the middle of the forest, its tracks rusted and warped by decades of rain. High in the Selkirk Mountains, Sandon glittered with a different kind of promise. Founded in 1891 by the Sandon Mining Company, it quickly became the silver capital of the West. By 1898, the population swelled to 2,500, and the streets buzzed with electric streetcars, hotels, and saloons. Wealth poured in from the mines, and the city boasted stone banks and a grand hotel, all set against a backdrop of steep, forested slopes. But prosperity in Sandon was always precarious. Fires in 1901 and 1905 gutted much of the business district, and as the richest veins ran dry, the mining companies pulled out. By 1913, the main mine was closed. The post office lingered until 1924, but most residents had already scattered. Now, only a handful of brick and stone buildings stand, battered by snow and rain. The once grand hotel and the old ore processing mill are left as reminders of how quickly a mountain fortune can vanish. In both Antioch and Sandon, the ruins tell a story of ambition and isolation, of towns built by the promise of metal and undone by the very forces that once made them rich. Cobalt, Ontario, exploded into existence almost by accident. In the summer of 1903, workers laying steel for the Temiskaming and Northern Ontario Railway uncovered veins of pure silver just below the surface. Within a year, prospectors poured in from across the continent. The Cobalt Mining Company and a dozen rivals carved shafts and tunnels through the hard Canadian shield, drawing thousands of miners, engineers, and merchants. By 1910, the town pulsed with life, its population climbing past 4,500, its streets lined with hotels, banks, and shops. Silver shipments left the district by the ton, fueling not just fortunes, but the rapid growth of Northern Ontario itself. But the market could not hold. By the 1920s, the richest ore bodies had been worked out, and the global price of silver was on a steady decline. Mines closed one after another, and the crowds melted away. Today, Cobalt's legacy lies scattered across the hills: abandoned headframes, rusted rail tracks, and the stone base of the old smelter. The Cobalt Heritage Museum now keeps watch over what's left: a few company houses, a schoolhouse, and the silent tunnels beneath the earth. Far to the west, Coal Creek in British Columbia's East Kootenay region tells a quieter story of decline. Founded in 1905 by the Coal Creek Coal Company, the settlement grew to support over 350 miners and their families. Black seams of coal fueled the steam engines and steel mills of a growing nation. Life here was hard but steady, even as production costs rose and railway demand faded. The town's fate was sealed not by a single disaster, but by the slow grind of economics. By the 1950s, the mine was no longer profitable. One by one, families packed up and left. The last load of coal shipped out in 1958, and Coal Creek's post office closed soon after. Today, the forest has reclaimed much of the site. Only the skeletal frame of a water tower and the yawning mouth of an abandoned mine shaft remain, standing as mute witnesses to a century of ambition and exhaustion. Both Cobalt and Coal Creek reveal the same lesson. When the market turns, even the busiest towns can empty out, leaving only traces for those who come looking. Kitsault stands in the remote wilds of northwest British Columbia, a town frozen in the fluorescent light of the early 1980s. Northwest molybdenum lulitid broke ground here in 1979, pouring millions into a purpose-built community designed for 1,200 residents. The vision was total: 200 apartments, rows of single-family homes, a shopping mall, a cinema, a hospital, a school, and even a curling rink. Every unit came fully furnished, refrigerators humming, sinks gleaming, curtains drawn. The utilities never went dark. Power, water, and heat still flow behind locked doors, preserving carpets, furniture, and even the last magazines left on coffee tables. The mall's glass doors remain sealed, its grocery aisles untouched. In the cinema, rows of seats still face a blank screen, the projection booth silent but intact. But the world price of molybdenum collapsed in 1982, dropping by nearly a third in less than a year. With no warning, the company ordered a full evacuation. On October 31st, 1982, Kitsault's last Halloween, residents packed up and left. The town was sealed, steel doors locked, windows boarded, the entire settlement left as a corporate time capsule. No vandals, no scavengers, no slow decay. Kitsault remains pristine, eerily sterile, a modern ghost town that feels as if its people might return at any moment, but never do. Beneath the surface of Lake Minnewanka, the remains of a vanished resort lie in cold, green water. In 1912, the Canadian Pacific Railway built a lakeside lodge and cluster of cabins here, hoping to draw tourists into the wilds of Banff National Park. For decades, visitors arrived by steamer, stepping onto wooden docks to fish, hike, and dance in the shadow of the mountains. The lodge bustled each summer, its dining room filled with laughter and the clatter of plates. But this lakeside escape was always temporary. In 1941, engineers raised the dam, flooding the valley and forcing the last residents to leave. By 1970, the site was fully abandoned, its buildings drowned beneath the rising reservoir. Today, scuba divers descend 30 to 40 meters to find the ghostly outlines of foundations, dock pilings, and the scattered cookware of a forgotten kitchen. Metal bed frames and stone oven bases rest on the lakebed, preserved in icy silence. Each artifact tells of a place erased not by fire or market collapse, but by deliberate design, a community sacrificed for power and progress, its story now held in the stillness under the water. Rowley's story begins with coal and ends in ashes. Founded in 1905 by the Alberta Coal and Coke Company, the town quickly grew into a tight-knit settlement of miners and their families. For a decade, the tipple-loaded railcars and the schoolhouse rang with children's voices. Then, in 1912, a fire swept through the heart of Rowley, destroying the tipple and most of the wooden homes. The company declared bankruptcy, and by 1915, the last families had packed up and left. All that remains is the stone foundation of the tipple, a doorway from the schoolhouse, and a scattering of iron spikes rusting in the prairie grass. Darcy, British Columbia, faced a different kind of erasure. Laid out as a rail hub in the early 1900 teens, the town's future depended entirely on the Canadian National Railway planners. In 1913, a new route bypassed Darcy, leaving its wooden depot stranded. Over the next 50 years, trains thundered by without stopping, and the settlement withered. By 1965, only empty frame houses stood beside the tracks, windows broken and doors swinging in the wind. Crown Village, Saskatchewan, met its end not through disaster or neglect, but by government decree. On October 31, 1983, residents received an eviction notice from the Provincial Ministry of Natural Resources. The land was needed for a hydroelectric project, and the Crown reclaimed every lot. Within a month, families were gone, leaving behind silent streets and boarded-up homes. The court filing, CR 8345, closed the book on a community that had survived long after its mines were exhausted. Each of these towns vanished for a different reason: fire, a shifted rail line, or the stroke of a bureaucrat's pen. Their ruins are a reminder that settlement on the Canadian frontier was always fragile, and that the forces shaping these places could erase a town as quickly as they built it. Each silent street and weathered ruin warns us: prosperity built on a single resource is always at risk. Today, over 1,500 Canadian towns stand as a cautionary monument to boom and bust ambition. As new industries surge and fade, the lesson remains: every thriving community can become a ghost overnight. What rises fast can vanish faster. What future ruins are we building now? Share your thoughts below.